She-Ra reboot controversy. Just gonna do a retrospective. Let's take a look. Oh dear. Oh dear. Oh, not again. Not this again. This again. My goodness, it's only been like, what, a month since Thundercats, and now this? Ah, jeez. You guys are tearing me apart. So, about a week after the internet was all riled up about the new designs for the She-Ra reboot, I might as well throw my 2 cents in on the matter. However, before we get into actually talking about the designs, there are a few things I want to address first. Firstly is that Professor Geek did a take on the redesigns, and I think he did a good job at addressing why the design of She-Ra does not resonate with people and why that's an issue. Thus, I won't actually be covering that part of the designs, but just in case you haven't seen them, I will link to them in the description. What I am going to do is look at how the designs reflect the characters they're supposed to be representing, and then roll within the show. Think of it as a similar design philosophy used in fighting games, except applied to animated television. Now we can properly begin. Let's start with Bo. In the original run, he struck me as being a gentleman warrior, both strong yet charming. His muscular figure shows that he can be an effective bowman when he's not getting himself into trouble. As for the gentleman part, you need only look at his immaculately combed hair and his mustache. The redesign of Bo strikes me as neither of those aspects. His frame is way lighter. He looks like he'll have a hard time stringing his bow, never mind drawing it back to get a good shot. As for the gentleman part, that seems to have been tossed out completely, which is sad as having red hair would actually mesh well with his darkened complexion. Speaking of lacking red, there's barely any of that color in his suit. What little red remains is in the heart emblem. Now white's the primary color, with a pink strip crossing it, which just seems to put the new bow in a completely different direction. Overall, if it weren't for the heart symbol and the quiver, he would be completely unrecognizable as Bo. Decided to take the liberty of drawing redesigns of the characters, and for Bo, I just decided to keep the mustache and hair and just rearrange how the torso looks. Otherwise, there isn't that much to change. However, it's these details that allow us to recognize Bo as a character. Because of this, I give Bo a D+. Barely resembles the original. Next up is Glimmer, who was the original leader of the Great Rebellion and princess to the Bright Moon Kingdom. She wasn't too much of a fighter, mainly commanding from the rebels' hideout. When she does get into a combat situation, she's not really a frontliner, relying on light-based magical powers and some limited flight. The outfit colors really only hint that she's royalty, what with the purples and blues. Her redesign is pretty close to where I think it should be. Her silhouette is a bit chunkier, but that's okay. She's not really that big a fighter as she has been spending some time in the palace. Maybe the rebellion's just started. It also does set her apart from She-Ra. She's a lot more recognizable as a different sort of character. The colors are exactly the same, pretty much. It tends to favor more towards purples and pinks, but that generally seems to be fitting. There are just a few tweaks that I would change, mostly just dropping down that zipper on the top of it just to get more of a skirt look to her overcoat. Maybe some more symmetrical features like gloves and pauldrons, and also adding a bit of a fur lining to the coat just to make it look a bit more regal, which is reflected in this drawing right here. I'd give the redesign a C+. A lot of small tweaks are needed. Catra actually began as a villain working under the Horde, who on rare occasions would cooperate with the heroes. She could turn into a large cat via her magical mask that she wore. Otherwise, her design really struck me as sort of a femme fatale, a lot of red, black hair, high cheekbones. not much else to it, really. As for the redesign, I can't really make out the silhouette due to how she's posed. However, this is actually pretty good just from what I can see here. They've kept most of her silhouette, however they've upped her cat features and kept her mask. So she's recognizable as Catra. She really does look like somebody who could turn into a giant cat. Out of the lot, it's probably the best design. So I'll give it a B, only because I need to see the full design of her to really go any higher on that. Now we get the elephant in the room, She-Ra. Let's start with the positives first, what say? The outfit as a whole is a bit more conservative than the original, however it does have that Valkyrie-like feathered gold motif. Big issue is the lack of a heroic build. In this case, a normal heroic build would be what most consider to be how Wonder Woman would look. However, she is a younger take on She-Ra. That said, there's barely any muscle, there's barely any feminine figure to her. A lot of people are complaining about the jaw, which indeed is a lot more squared, the cutting board chest, which even on like a 16-year-old is kind of unrealistic. And you may say, well, it's a cartoon, it's not meant to be realistic. Indeed, it doesn't have to be realistic. That said, you're still trying to convey information to the viewer. You still want to have a young heroic build. Pulling from fighting games, I would say Noel Vermillion's probably a better example of it. Some would have you think that people want She-Ra to look like Light Fei Ling. Really, I don't hear anybody saying that. Mostly it's just that there is no femininity to her figure, which just doesn't seem to work for this sort of character. Again, Professor Geek explained it perfectly in his video. Go see that. Really, all that's needed is just getting that figure in there so you can tell them that she is indeed a princess of power. She does have this quality to her that she may be a bit more powerful than she looks, she may be a little bit older looking than she actually is. Which is okay, because that would actually sell this entire, okay, Adora is this one character who looks a certain way, whereas She-Ra should look a different way. If you have Adora have this sort of flatter look, that's actually really good, which it seems to be the opposite really in the screenshots that I'm seeing. Adora seems to have this more feminine look, but She-Ra does not. What's that really saying to people? That femininity is weak? Because it really shouldn't be. Especially, again, go back to Professor Geek, he does mention the female hero's journey and how that plays out differently than the male one. That said, I will have to get to that subject on the proper retrospective, which will be coming up next. I mean, overall the designs are somewhat passable, but they do seem to miss some of the ideas that the characters are supposed to be going for. As for the proper retrospective, that's going to require a little bit more research. But really the show kind of looks a bit more promising than Thundercats Roar. Oh geez, that one. I might just do a design video on that as well.
Why?